Fitness with New Method Wellness.
New Method Wellness, our podcast about recovery, people's perspective of recovery from substance abuse and mental illness. Today, our guest, we're very excited about Karen Casey. Karen is an author, and I believe you're a speaker and a lecturer, right, Karen?
That's right.
I was reading your bio and I bought your book, Let Go Now, because I was trying to be a professional and do some research. And wow, like, I love the way I was looking through much of your published work, and I love the way it starts at recovery and moves into different areas of recovery. Now I'm starting, after going through different work that you've done, I'm starting to get to the point of like the letting go, the Al-Anon piece, the codependency piece, which seems to be at the core of substance abuse.
I agree. And I think that for, excuse me, I have a lung condition,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
which sometimes creates clearing my throat and coughing occasionally, hopefully not too much. And I'm sure you can edit it out, or the brains behind it
The
can edit it
brains
out.
and beauty.
But my own journey in recovery started in 1974 in Al-Anon. And
What do they call that? Getting in through the back door.
getting in through the back door. And, my whole point at that period, it was suggested to me that I go because, my first marriage was crazy alcoholic. I had no idea really that I had the problem too. I could recognize that he had the problem. But then after our divorce, I just kept connecting with the same kind of person. And one of those people ended up in treatment, and his counselor suggested I go to Al-Anon. And it was so interesting. I had no idea, never heard of it before, had no idea what to expect. And went in and sat down, and it was at a Unitarian church in my neighborhood, actually. And I went in and sat down, and it was a room full of people I'd never seen before, of course. And and I was struck by the fact that I felt at ease, and I had not, I went being scared, being full of fear, not knowing what to expect. And I walked in and sat down and immediately felt at ease.
Hmm.
And it was it was really a mind altering experience for me to go into a setting like that and to hear people talk with such compassion to each other and about the journey that they were on. And so it wasn't until 76, 2 years later, that I ended up in AA myself. But I have come to believe over these 47 years in AA that there isn't anybody in AA that doesn't also need to go to Al-Anon. And it's not the kind of thing that everybody in AA wants to hear. But I really think that at the core of virtually all of us, at the core of virtually all of humanity, I think there is that pull to try to fix other people,
Mm.
to take care of other people in one way or another. And ultimately, it's for selfish reasons. It's so that we feel better.
My
And
sister-in-law says that we shouldn't be able to leave the hospital with a new baby unless we have a court card of Al-Anon signed off.
yeah. So, I think that my personal feeling, and obviously I don't want to take this in any direction you don't want to go, but um, my personal feeling is that those of us who are in a 12-step program, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Al Anon or any of the other 12-step programs, I've come to believe a lot of those people a lot
Yeah.
because of having this foundation and direction in our life and this support. You know, it has never occurred to me in all of these years to not continue to go to
Mm.
meetings. And I go to multiple meetings a week. And I'm sure that I'm sure that I'll do that for the rest of my life. And that's when I started out by saying, you know, because things are on Zoom, I can go to, I do go to one in-person meeting every Saturday morning, but I go to 3 additional AA meetings online and 2 Al-Anon meetings online every week. And because of Zoom, excuse me for this,
Mm.
it makes it just so easy. So,
I go to a meeting on Saturday mornings with people that I've been in program with for about 34 years, and they live in different places. But like, every lots of people get sober together or they get into recovery together, but people move away, so you don't get to keep up with those same people. And every Saturday morning, I see these people that I saw at the Costa Mesa Alano Club 34 years ago, and we were
right.
all just really hanging on and trying to help each other. And now seeing them is so incredible.
It is. I so understand what you mean by that. That we can continue following each other's journey for however many years we live because we have this constant contact if we take advantage of it. And every Thursday morning too, I go to an AA meeting that's actually out of Biarritz, France.
Oh my
And that was
gosh.
one of those meetings that I went to. And I've been going to it for the last 3 years, every Thursday morning. And there are people from all over the world who come to that meeting. And so it's just, you feel as though, even though we've never ever been in the same room with each other than on Zoom, I feel like I know them well because we listen to each other and everybody speaks from the heart. So it's doesn't matter that we are thousands of miles apart. We're right there together with each other all the time.
And that's the piece, right? The connection.
That is, that is. And you know, I'm sure it probably was the same for you. You've been on this journey for a really long time, like me, that you probably had no idea when you came in what your life was going to end up blossoming into. And I certainly didn't either. You
Did
know,
you know you were going to be a writer? Did you always want to
no,
be a writer?
as a kid, I really loved writing stories, and I remember writing a play and building a little stage when I was in grade school in the 6th grade. Another friend and I built this little stage and wrote this play and did it for the other younger kids in the elementary. And I always had there was always something about writing that I really loved, but partly too it was because I could end up writing stories about families that were happier than mine.
Mm.
And so there was a way in which I could kind of so I was writing fiction really when I
Hmm.
was a young girl. And but it never occurred to me that I and of course I don't write fiction now, but I've often thought maybe I should try that someday. But at 84, I don't know how many years I have left to give that a try. But
I think you should do it. I think that should be your next project. You'd be really, I did a play when I was about 7 years old, and I got a bunch of my mom's clothes and makeup, and I made all the kids in the neighborhood do what I wanted because, I'm the director. And I said, nobody can come unless they pay me 50 cents, which, 50
no,
years ago, whatever. So this lady who had twin blonde boys lived down the street, and she came and she said, Deanna, can all the kids watch if I give you a quarter? And I said, let me think about it, because initially it was 50 cents a person.
Uh,
So I negotiated down to a quarter for the whole neighborhood.
yeah, that's wonderful. That's what a great memory. And that I keep getting ahead of myself. I'm actually writing another book right now, a workbook to go along with the 40th anniversary, or to go along with Each Day a New Beginning, my first book, which we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of. But
Wow.
one of the things that I talk about in that book is having people kind of um, grab some of those wonderful memories of their youth. Because whenever we're going through a hard time, to spend a moment or two kind of savoring a fond memory, it's really a way to get through a hard time, I think.
I
But to
love
get back
that.
to being a writer, when I was an undergraduate, one of my sorority sisters, I would pay her to write papers for me because I was really into partying.
Of course.
I never had any idea that I would really do anything. I taught elementary school for a few years, and my first husband left me for another woman, which is maybe not unusual in an alcoholic arrangement. I mean, that's what we really had, was an alcoholic arrangement. And the result of that, though, was that I ended up going to graduate school, which had never, never, never been on my radar screen. And so the upside of that was that I discovered in graduate school writing was absolutely transformed me. And I would sit around with other graduate students, and people would just moan and groan because of all the papers we had to write. And first class I took, in fact, in this doctoral program, was that you had to write a paper every week, and everybody was like, "Oh crap!" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is just terrific." I mean, I was so surprised. I had no idea that that's how I would feel, and that's how it was the entire time I was in graduate school. It still didn't dawn on me that that was an indication of anything, that I
Yeah.
was going to end up becoming a writer. Uh, it wasn't until after I had finished that somebody said to me, "What do you think you want to do?" And I had taught at the University of Minnesota all through my doctoral program. And I felt like I didn't really want to teach at the university anymore. And I kind of surprised myself when I said, "Well, I think I'd like to be a writer."
Oh my gosh.
And that person suggested that I contact Hazelden. They worked at Hazelden. They said, "Why don't you contact Hazelden and see if they would hire you as a writer?" And Hazelden, you might be familiar with Hazelden. And I contacted them, and they said, "No, they don't hire writers." Um, but I talked to the man who was in charge of their publishing program, and he said, "I'd like to hire you since you have a PhD to get involved in our publishing marketing area in some fashion, but not as a writer." And I thought, well, okay, I mean, it just, I mean, I was just kind of open to ideas. But, and here's kind of the segue to writing. I don't know how it was for you when you came into AA, but I had never had a relationship with God
Mm.
as a kid. I never had a relationship. I didn't even consider when I went to Al-Anon, even though it felt good, I didn't know that that was because there was that presence there. When I went into that first AA meeting, the thing that attracted me was that it was just a room full of 200 great looking women and really good looking men. And
I hear you.
yeah, and I thought, oh my God, I've spent all this time sitting on bar stools. I should have been at AA. Look at all these men.
I
I
remember
mean,
thinking there appear to be more men than women here. These are good odds.
yes, right, exactly. Honestly, I didn't. I had no idea. I had a bottle of Jack Daniels at home. I had no idea that I would never take another drink.
Wow.
It didn't dawn on me at all. I went because it was suggested I go. I had not gone to treatment because I didn't have any insurance to pay for treatment. Um, and I looked around and I thought, you know, I think I can do this. It looks like a pretty fun place to be. And honestly, it's kind of embarrassing, but this is the truth. A guy came up to me at that meeting at the end and said, "Now I noticed that you were in the newcomers group." And he said, "Now you be sure and come back next week." And I thought that he meant he wanted to like maybe have a relationship. You be sure and come back next week. To me, that was like saying, I want to know you better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I thought, man, I gotta go back. But I went home and the desire to take a drink was gone. I poured out that bottle, and that was that. And that was May 24th, 1976.
Wow.
And I went back that next week, and you know what that doggone guy was doing? He was talking to another woman. And I thought, see, my ex-husband, had been a total philanderer for our 12-year marriage. All of the men I had been involved with were pretty much the same way. And I thought about this guy. I thought, oh my God, we just started a relationship last week and already you're talking to another woman.
I'm your woman.
Yeah, right, right. So, when I look back at the history of how it all happened, nothing was the way I expected it to be. But I started because I could see that others had a feeling about God that I didn't have. I would have it kind of at the meeting, but I would go home and feel like I had lost that touch. And so ultimately I sat and started to write, to journal about it. And here's really how my first book came to be. Because I had been 3 years sober, actually, by the time I took that job there. And the man who was president said to me one day, he just kind of, I think, took an interest in what I was doing, a healthy interest, not an unhealthy interest. And I told him that I kind of struggled with this, but that I was doing a lot of writing to try to strengthen my relationship, to try to know who God was. And he said, well, would you mind sharing with me what you're writing someday? And I was kind of stunned, but I thought, yeah, sure. I didn't care. So I took it in to him and a few days later, and I said, here, Harry, here's the kind of stuff I'm writing. And about a week later, he contacted me and said, Karen, I think this is a book. I think it's a book we need to publish.
Wow.
And I was just dumbfounded. And that's how Each Day a New Beginning ended up being published by Hazelden in 1982.
That's incredible. Like that you just kind of followed the open doors.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good way to put it, because um, I think that that's really, if all of us, if everybody could only take a look at the timeline of their lives, they would see that there were constantly doors opening,
Hmm.
bringing them to wherever they are at that point in time. And, we've all had struggles. We've all stumbled along the way. And I think that so often the things that create stumbles for us are the doors opening, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I mean, if Bill had not have left me, I would not have gone to graduate school. I would not have discovered this love of writing. I would not have ended up ultimately in AA. I would not have even tried to have a relationship with God. I mean, one thing simply led to the next. And so here I am, all these many years later, and all kinds of books later, and I kind of assumed that this is really how my life was intended to be. And what comes next is intended to come next.
A friend of mine, we read your meditation every morning and then we write to each other like what came up for us.
Oh,
And
neat.
her name is Kitty. And my sponsor posts it every day. So my sponsor, Anne, is so excited about this interview. But so Kitty read it last week and she said, Deanna, I think that God is in the left hand turns. And I thought that was really cool, like the things that we're not expecting. And then I interviewed this other writer last week, and he just made a movie. He just wrote a screenplay and directed a film and produced. And he was saying, one day they lost all the audio. They lost all the audio on their film. And he was like, what's this going to happen? Like, stay curious, what's going to happen? Instead of losing his mind and freaking out, he goes, I wonder what's going to happen. And the best thing came out of losing that audio. It
Yeah.
turned a different direction that was so much better. And I thought, I wish we could remember that all the time.
Yeah, and I think that, I actually have kind of come to the conclusion that it takes maturity, it takes aging,
Mm.
because I think that at my age now, I'm better at um, remembering, or when something happens that that isn't feeling very good, I'm better at remembering. There really is something good in the midst of this.
Hmm.
And just wait to find out. Just be open. Just trust. Because, you know, I, I mean, early in my childhood, like so many of us who end up in recovery programs of one kind or another, didn't have the happiest of childhoods. And yet, when I look back on all of that played an important part too in where my life was intended to go. And like you hear people say all the time in one program or another, our parents did the best they could for all that they had been taught in their lives. And I look back at that, and I know that my parents did, even though I never felt at the time that I was getting what I wanted from them. And I think that that's probably true for 90% of the population. It's like, oh, why couldn't they have done this? Or my best friend's mom certainly was better than my mom at something or other, or, you know.
And I think like when people, I meet a lot of people on their first few days of recovery because I
Yeah,
work in treatment. And I think that when they come in, like all of us, when we first, all we could think about was how horrible our childhoods were. And for most of us, it can't be 100% true. I mean, there,
right,
and so I had a challenging childhood, but I also can remember putting on plays. And it's okay to remember both kinds. And I will sometimes challenge new people to try and think of any good times or any, I remember the first time somebody asked me about a family member that I had a lot of, I was really upset with, something good about them. A therapist asked me, and I thought, I can't think of anything good about this person. And she said, just anything. And I said, well, he was athletic. I like that about him. And she goes, okay, that's a good start. And I said, well, he was a really good dancer. And just, nothing is all bad. But I think so
right,
many of us, when we first get to recovery, it feels like it's all bad, and
right,
now I think about that person and how much they encouraged my education and those kind of things.
right. Well, and as a kid, I had a relative who was sexually inappropriate with me, and I lucky that it wasn't as bad as it might have been, but it was still wrong, and I still felt so um, uncomfortable and weirded out by it. I was like 10 years old, and I didn't understand it, and and then as I got older, that hard thing, and I saw him all the time. As I got older, and this was one of those things where I talked about this at an AA meeting yesterday. In fact, one of the hard things for me was the fact that as I got older, I found myself being somewhat attracted to him. Not that I ever acted on it; it wasn't like that. He was very handsome, very dashing, very those things, and and it was, and I ended up feeling so ashamed of myself that after having experienced that as a kid, and this is obviously before I ever got sober, but how could I have then felt any kind of an attraction for somebody? Well, I also realize that when you're a kid who feels like an ugly duckling, when somebody pays attention to you, it there's something about that that makes you feel special.
It's so human, right?
Yeah, right. And so, but the thing that I found out about this individual later in life, I realized he was alcoholic, and I realized that he had been sexually abused as a kid. I learned that kind of through others, talking to others about him. I never shared and never told anybody what he had done, because in my family, I literally was afraid that people would say, "Well, what did you?" I mean, that kind of the family environment I grew up
And it was
in.
a different time, right?
Yeah, very, very different time. We're talking in the 46, 47, 48, that era. And so yeah, I mean, today, kids, I think, are at least letting people know when somebody has been inappropriate, or I'm sure that not all kids do, but more so than ever then. But I found out that he had been abused as a child, and that his father had committed suicide, and his uncle had committed suicide, and his cousin had committed suicide. And all of these people in his life had, all of that had played so on his mind that I think that he wasn't operating obviously from a healthy place at all. And so it allowed me to look at him differently. And it allowed me to be forgiving of him. And I think ultimately, if there's any one thing that I have learned in all my years in recovery, it's really about being able to forgive others and to forgive ourselves.
And what do you think about that, Karen? I mean, I personally believe that it's harder for me to forgive myself if I can't forgive others.
I agree. I
It,
agree. You know, I believe that people, the mistakes people make are really related to how they're feeling about themselves. You know, when
like
people
hurt
are
people hurt people.
hurt people, hurt people. That's right. And so the willingness to forgive, and I don't go around preaching uh, preaching Christian ideas, but I really do believe in the importance of forgiveness, just like we are taught to forgive. And I think that if I can't forgive others, there's no way I can really come together with anybody. That if I'm holding somebody off because of something that they have done or that I think they have done, I'm putting a barrier between me and everybody.
Hmm.
And that somehow I have to be able to embrace everybody.
And everybody's humanity.
Right. And that is not always an easy thing to do. We live in such a divided society these days. And I think that um, it really puts us all to the test. It's like I don't want to find myself falling into the trap of I'm right and he's wrong, because then we'll never come together again. And I grew up, like I say, I grew up in a family where there was all this tension, where my mom, and there was a lot of tension between my mom and my dad. I had two older sisters and a younger brother. My dad was not alcoholic. They both had a lot of alcoholic. There were alcoholics falling out of the family trees of both of them. But my dad was not alcoholic, although I think the only reason he wasn't, his uncle was, and in fact, he had two uncles who were. I think the only reason he wasn't is because he had this attitude of three martinis and by God, that's all.
Mm.
So, I mean, that's kind of how he approached life. He approached life pounding on the desk or pounding on the supper table, and so we all tiptoed around. And but in everybody, there is a reason for how they come to that place in their lives. And after I got sober, I'd been sober a couple years, and I took a family of origin class.
Mm.
And in that family of origin class, the facilitator said, go interview members, your elders, and find out what their lives were like. And so, of course, I wanted to talk to my mom and dad. I had been kind of the outcast in the family because I had always been outspoken, and I had always kind of been quick to argue with my dad. I didn't like how he talked to my mother often. He was never physically abusive, but he was emotionally abusive. And so I was the one that was always kind of standing up against him. And so I talked to each of them, and did I get an earful from both of them?
Wow.
That totally changed how I looked at each of them. And Anna sent me a list of who are the people you look up to. Who are those people you look up to? And I thought, I would never have thought I would do this or say this, but my mom and my dad are both on that list now as an 84-year-old person. Because my mother, when I sat down with her, I said, tell me about who you are that I don't know, and what life has been like for you. And honestly, Deanna, she said, I never felt like a good mother. I never felt like a good wife. And I never wanted you when I was pregnant for you. And I
Wow.
think why you're alcoholic. I said, oh my gosh, Mom. Number one, I'm alcoholic because I'm alcoholic. Had nothing to do with whether or not you wanted me or not. But she had not wanted to be pregnant again. And my dad desperately wanted a boy. And my two older siblings were girls. And pregnancy was very hard on her. But she had, this was, my mother was 30 years older than me. And I was probably 38 at the time I asked her this question, because I was 36 when I got sober. And she had carried that secret, I know, for all of those years, all 30 or 38 years, because she could never have told my dad that. And because he would have shamed her terribly. And so we sat on the couch in the living room of their house and just held each other. And I just, she cried and cried and cried. And I said, I just love you for telling me the truth, because it explains so much, because it explains so much about my own codependency, about my own clinging to other people because of being afraid of being abandoned. So I think, everything in our lives ultimately is attached to everything else. And I got to tell you briefly about my dad, because I sat down with my dad out in the backyard at the picnic table, and I said, tell me about your life. And, as I said, he was a banker there in Lafayette. I grew up in Lafayette, Indiana. He was a banker, and he was a success. And he said, I've been afraid every day of my life.
Wow.
You could have knocked me over with a feather. And he told me a story about his childhood when he was mowing the lawn at age 6 and accidentally cut off his younger brother's, the tips of his fingers, and just got brutally attacked by his parents for it. And he spent the rest of his life fearful of making an error. And so therefore, his fear foisted that kind of an environment in our household. So, so I looked at him though, and I thought, God, he spent his entire life being afraid. And yet look at what he did with his life in spite of the fear.
Yeah, like the courage to be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I just kind of sit back and marvel. And, my mother at age 52 learned how to drive a car. She'd never driven a car before. My dad tried to teach her when they got married. She couldn't get it. He got angry. That was that. At age 52, she had gone out to get a job. She had been a homemaker, and she decided she wanted a job. At age 52, doggone it, she went out and took driver training lessons, came home one night, laid her driver's license down on the supper table, and said, well, I know how to drive.
Wow.
And everybody was dumbstruck. And my dad went out the next day and bought her a little yellow Pinto.
Oh my
I don't know
gosh.
if you, but the thing about that And it always impressed me when I look back on it, and we were all just stunned. And doggone it, at age 52 is when I learned to ride a motorcycle. I took motorcycle training on my first Harley.
That
And
is
my
so
mother,
great. We need a
my
picture of that.
I just loved riding a motorcycle. But it didn't even dawn on me at the time that, my gosh, my mom learned to drive at 52, and I learned to drive a motorcycle at 52.
I was just going to say before you said the motorcycle, what did your mom teach you watching her get a license at 52?
Yeah. And, she used to say to me, she said, I'm afraid every time you get on that bike, but I'm so proud of you. And it really, I knew that she really understood what it meant to do something like that at age 52
Wow.
because of what she had done.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I just sometimes sit at my desk, or sit and just kind of think about all that has gone on in my life from childhood until today. And I think, God, it has all fit together so beautifully. And you would never have convinced me that I would have thought this kind of, I wouldn't have had that kind of thought 50 years ago.
No way.
No way.
Tell me why you're so passionate about helping other people in recovery.
Well, because of the help I have had, and because of how, it has given me this incredible foundation. It has, there's something that feels so good. And I'm sure that in the treatment field, I know that you know this too. Helping others just feels good,
Mm.
because every person you help, every person that any of us helps when we go to a meeting, we know that in fact helps them be resilient so that they can turn around and help somebody else.
I think
So
it's
I,
so
I think
strange.
it's about giving, it's about passing it on.
Yes. When I was newly sober, my first sponsor, Miss Connie, she gave me $10. And that $10 filled up my gas tank and I bought a pack of cigarettes. And I said to her, Connie, I can't pay you back. And she said, Oh, I don't want you to pay me back. I want you to pay it forward. So every time I pick up a check for a newcomer at dinner, or I give somebody a ride or do something and they say, That's so nice of you, I go, I'm just paying somebody back a long time ago. This original $10, I just keep paying back over and over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is, I love that whole concept of pay it forward. I don't know if you remember seeing the movie So Many
Yeah, yeah, I
Paid
remember
It
that.
Forward. That
It
was
was
just such
good.
a great movie. And I think that was the first time I had ever been introduced to to the concept in the way that movie expressed it. But that if all of us practiced that paying it forward, this would be a very different world
Hmm.
than the one that we too often bounce around in.
Somebody that I sponsor said to me, I just don't have time to go to meetings anymore, and I pretty much like my life feels good. And I said, it sounds very selfish to me that you came here and you got all of this help and love and compassion for free, and now you're just going to leave. And I didn't really think about it. It just kind of came out of my mouth. And she shared it the next time at our women's home group. She said, my sponsor said, and she said, I thought about it all week, how selfish it is to come here and get everything. And all these women helped me. And when I was a single mom, they did all these things for me. And now I'm on my feet and I'm doing really well. And I'm just going to leave.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that to her.
And I
And I'm
wasn't
so
trying to
glad you,
shame her or be pejorative. I was just thinking, it just came out like, wow, I can't imagine like taking all this stuff and then just
right,
saying thanks.
right. Yeah, because there's such joy, I think, in
Hmm.
giving back.
Hmm.
And
And it kind of ruins the cycle, the cyclical motion of give and take. If I just stop it, it kind of ruins
right,
it.
yeah, right. I mean, I think that it's not an accident that I got sober or that you got sober. Look at what you have done in the treatment world. I mean, you know, um, you've made such a difference in people's lives, and hopefully, I've made a difference in some people's lives too. But if it weren't for recovery, you and I, neither one, would have had the opportunity we've had. So it is about saying, okay, here I am. How can I be used?
I heard someone say, like, our gifts are from our higher power. Like your gift of writing, my gift of working with people, those are our gifts from our higher powers. And then what we do with them, that's our gift back to our higher power.
Oh, I like that.
So if I just like take this gift of working with people and go, thanks, I'm good, it it feels like kind of a slap in the face. Like this isn't like I didn't come up with this idea.
Right.
I didn't give myself
Yeah.
this gift. It's almost like, like what I'm doing with it is my gift back.
Right. Yeah, I like the way you've put that because I love what I do, and I can tell by listening to you that you love what you do too.
I have this like eternal optimist. Like I say that my job is about carrying hope. Like people
Oh, I
come
like
to me and they have no hope. And I
Yeah,
just got this little hope. I go, oh, I'll just carry it around until you're ready to carry it. And I'll give it to you. And my mentor says it's like holding someone's gold. I'll just hold your gold for you until you're ready.
yeah,
But so I'm like, people come to me, they're like, I've been to 26 treatment centers. I can't stay sober. I don't know why, because it doesn't make any sense. I go, oh, we can help you. You can get better. You can turn your like. I don't even know where does that come from. Like,
yeah,
I've been doing this so long. My natural reaction should be, oh, forget it. You've done too much. It's not going to work. But I just go, let's figure it out. Let's put this
yeah,
puzzle together and figure out what you've been missing all this time. And I don't. It almost feels kind of Pollyanna, but it just keeps working. So I just keep doing it.
yeah. Oh, I think that's wonderful. How many treatment centers?
I this is it's one treatment center. It's a big place, and I mean it's not huge, but it's individualized. So like each person is really important to me,
Right,
like their story. I've
right.
seen these. You know, I don't. I would never talk bad about another place, but I don't think it would work for me to be at like a 200 bed place because I don't, I just can't do the like cookie cutter, everybody do this works for everybody.
I think that that's a mistake. I do too. I think that it really does need to be individualized.
Mhm.
People really are individuals.
Right. We're all
They
so
come to you.
different.
They come to you with an individual. Maybe they come to you in one sense with the same kind of addictive problem, but how everybody needs to be walked through the process of getting better is different.
It's so
And
different. It's
yeah,
the one of the first things I learned in grad school was I got sober when I was 22, and I really thought if a young person came in and they were a young woman and she was like in her early 20s and she was experiencing exactly what I was. And she needed exactly what I needed. And I had this woman come in and I just said, oh, you're me. You feel what I felt and you need what I needed. And she started telling me this story about being taken away from her home by social services. And I thought, wait, that never happened to me. And I brought that experience into one of my classes and said, oh, everyone's really different and we all need different things. It was like really eye opening.
Yeah, you got sober really young.
I don't. I
And
really think I stayed sober all these years because I wasn't like sharp enough to, like, I really didn't know you could relapse. I didn't know you were allowed, that that was a thing. I thought once you join Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to come to meetings and work the steps and continuously do that, forever. That's just the way it is. Like, it never occurred to me that it was just okay to go and, so it wasn't like a I'm so strong thing. It was like I just didn't know it was an option.
well, it sounds like you and your story in some respects is similar to mine. I immediately hung around with people who simply stayed sober.
Yes.
I hung around with people who weren't traipsing in and out of the rooms all the
Yes.
time.
And remember, we
And
used to say stick with the winners. Like, I don't
yeah,
think you can say that anymore.
yeah,
But
right.
but we really did stick. And I was when you were saying about being in meetings in other places. My first sponsor kind of tricked me, and she said I used to travel a lot for work and stuff, and she said, Deanna, I'm going to collect meeting. Remember the meeting booklets that had all the
Oh,
meetings in
yeah.
them? She said, I'm going to collect those from all over the world. So you have to bring them to me. Well, I didn't realize she was doing that. So I would go to a meeting when I was out of town. So
Very clever.
I
Yeah.
wasn't the sharpest tool, like I'm saying. So I brought back these meeting pamphlets. I go, I brought you this from Spain. And she'd go, oh, and she'd just kind of throw it in the drawer. And I was like, what are you doing? That's your collection. I'm bringing these for your collect. And she'd go, yeah, perfect, thanks. But I did it for years and years and years. And then I got in the habit of anywhere I went to a meeting.
Wow. I don't know how much time we have, but I gotta tell you one little story, Deanna. I was in Ireland and I was over there and they had the international and um, I had gone to a meeting. I mean, I wanted to go to a meeting and a couple of us decided to go in search of a meeting. And the only one we could find that was close by where we were staying was at this little church. And honestly, we pulled up and it was totally dark. And it like, well, maybe there isn't any meeting here anymore. And we ended up driving around the church. And there was one car
Oh,
in the
wow.
parking lot. And but still we couldn't see any lights. We went up to the door and opened, and the door opened actually in the back. It hadn't opened in the front of the church. It opened in the back, and we walked in, and we could see down, clear down at the end of the hall, a little light. And we walked down at the end of the hall and walked into this room, and there sat a woman, and she was probably in her late 50s, and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you came. I have been holding this meeting for 8 years, hoping somebody would come.
Oh, my gosh.
Every year, I mean, every week for 8 years, she had been having a meeting there in hopes someone would come." And the thing that was so interesting though is as we shared, as we talked, she said, "Well, it has kept me sober because I knew I needed to stay sober in order to come, to open
Wow.
up for whoever else might come." And I think that I mean, there's just so many incredible stories, and we just don't know what it is we're giving back, how it is we're helping others. All we can be always sure of is that in the work that you do and in the meetings that any of us go to, we are in those moments helping others. And what better lives could we have than that?
I love that story. Karen, where can people find you online?
My website is www.womens-spirituality.com.
Okay.
My Facebook is just Karen Casey Author.
Mm,
My Instagram is Karen Casey Author. Two of my books are on Facebook all the time, each daily.
okay.
Meditations for Each Day a New Beginning, and meditations from one of the books that I wrote about A Course in Miracles, which has become, I don't know, you're familiar with the
Yes,
Course in
yes. I
Miracles.
love Course in Miracles.
I do too. Well, a couple of the books that I have written are directly related to A Course in Miracles. And so one of the meditation books that I wrote many years ago, back in 1995, was for A Course in Miracles.
Oh, that's so
So,
great.
so they can just look me up on any of those places and find Karen Casey. And on my website, they can find all of the books that I have written, and the one I'm working on right now is number 31.
Oh my gosh.
I know it just kind of shocks me, Deanna. It shocks me. You know, uh, I don't know. You know, um, I just, people ask me, when are you going to stop? When are you going to retire? And it's like, well, you know, it's like, this is what keeps calling to me. And I don't feel as though I have uh, necessarily, I've not been the sole writer. I've had this companion living in my mind all these years, who is constantly in communication with me.
I
And that's
love
how my
that.
writing has occurred.
Karen, who do you think we should interview next?
Well, you know, I know a woman named Gigi Langer,
Hmm.
who has written a book called Worry Less Now.
Okay.
Her name is spelled Gigi, and her last name is Langer, Langer.
Okay.
And I'm sure you can just find her by Googling her. Otherwise, her email is just glanger2202 at Gmail. And then I have another woman I've known for many years in recovery that just wrote a book about, and it's about her survival, really,
Oh,
from
wow.
being physically abused
Hmm.
and sexually abused by the husband she had.
Wow.
And she wrote a powerful book that is on Amazon. But her name is Carol E. Alden, Alden
Okay.
at gmail.com.
What, you kind of broke up. What was the first name?
Carolyn,
Oh, Carolyn. Okay.
and let me grab the book. A Triumph of Spirit
Ooh.
is the title of the book that she recently published. And she was an attorney in Philadelphia, and her story is riveting.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So you could contact either of those people, and I'm sure that they would be
I would love to read the
interested.
books and I would love to interview them and see what they think about recovery.
Sure. So now tell me before we hang up, How
Okay.
is Paula? How is Paula doing?
She's doing so great. She's I next week she and I are going to the Notre Dame game.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yes. Isn't that great?
Oh, that is. I'll give her a great big hug for me.
She's so funny. She comes over to my house and watches football with my husband. And
What you
I sit on the sofa with them and play on my phone and they watch football. They talk about their fantasy league and so she's a
yeah,
really good friend.
you'll have to tell her because I was never a football fan. And about well, this is the third winter, I guess. I have a sister that's soon to be 89
Wow.
who lives in Sarasota.
Uh-huh.
And honest to God, she is a fanatic about sports, football and basketball. And kind of she would always talk about football. And no, I'm not interested. But then it was kind of like, you know, we're both getting old, darn it. This is a way to connect more. So we
Hmm.
text each other all the time through football games. And of course, my favorite team, even though I'm right here with the Vikings, and I watched that game last night and they lost. I don't know if your husband was watching that or not, but they played the Philadelphia Eagles and they lost. But my favorite team is the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
And that's her favorite team, my sister's favorite team
So
too.
you guys can talk about it.
Oh yes, and it's just a great way. She's not in recovery. She's not, she's one of those people who, if she ever drank a half a glass of wine, that would be a lot.
That's funny.
Yeah, so it is. But that's kind of one of the things too you learn in recovery. How can you connect with people?
Yes.
It's about connection because that's how we heal. All relationships are through connection.
I love that. It's been so great talking to
Well,
you
thank
and
you.
listening to you. I cannot thank you enough for coming on our show.
Well,
I'm sure
thank
the
you.
listeners are going to love hearing about it and looking up your books. And like I said, we read it in my home group every day. So it's just, we cannot
Well,
thank you
thank you.
enough.
I've appreciated it very, very much. So nice to meet you.
It was
You
so
you
nice to meet
obviously do
you.
great, great work.
Thank you, Karen. It's a passion.
Stating the obvious with New Method Wellness.